We don't stop exercising because we get old. We get old because we stop exercising. So zone 2, they say, is where a lot of the magic happens, right? This is where we build our engine. When it comes to lactate threshold, it's a pretty simple definition, right? It's like the intensity level or the pace that we run at where our body can no longer flush the lactate through or remove it faster than it accumulates.
Okay.
If you are already a runner, or even if you're still beginner as well, I would still honestly recommend the lactate threshold test over the VO2 Max. The alcohol can influence any of your numbers. It usually reduces the quality of your sleep, impacts your heart rate variability, resting heart rate, all that kind of stuff. If you are a runner and you never experience this runner's high, it's okay. And
we are not promoting drugs here.
No, we're promoting running.
Right.
Running to produce this.
Hi guys, this is Runner View with Kat. Ready to join me on this run? Then let's go. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep your face safe. Good morning, runner viewers. Today we are running with Melody Presswood, who is a finisher of 32 marathons, including 3 ultras. She qualified for Boston 23 freaking times. She's a certified running coach and someone who can talk about the science of running nonstop. Thanks for running with us, Melody.
I'm happy to be here. It's a beautiful morning.
Yes. So Melody, when you run, what are the metrics or the things that you are usually tracking?
Sure. So all the fancy watches we have now help with a lot of different things. So not necessarily during my run, but sometimes after I'll check stats on it, right?
Okay.
So once you've been running for a while, some things don't change much, like your cadence, right? Or even your VO2 max once you hit a certain level. But after my runs, I like to see where my heart rate fell during my run based upon my paces, along with, kind of seeing how maybe that perceived effort translated to your paces. So some data you can get in Strava whenever you push your runs to Strava.
Okay.
And some you can get just from like Garmin Connect if you have a Garmin. And, but also just keeping track of like, how was my perceived effort from that run, which you don't need anything fancy to do.
Okay. Right? Well, you mentioned several things in terms and technology. Let's unpack that. Let's start with the heart rate.
Okay.
Why do we need to track our heart rate? Why is it important for runners?
So there's heart rate during your run and heart rate outside of your run as well, right?
Okay, yes.
So during your run, there are certain types of, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with heart rate zones.
No,
right.
Not sure with that.
Okay, so usually when it comes to running, we have 5 standard heart rate zones.
Okay.
And there are benefits to each. You shouldn't be training only in one. You really should be training throughout your heart rate zones in different times. So a quick split up of them. We have zone 1 and zone 2, which are usually your easier, sustainable paces, right?
Okay.
Long term, you almost feel like you could go forever.
I'm gonna check. I'm in zone 1 right now. All right, we're good.
Yeah. So think about this. Usually your long, slow distance runs, your easy pace. This is where you can easily have a conversation. And the key is that these zones, your body can flush through the lactate as fast as you're producing it. Okay. So that's why it's easy for us to maintain. We don't get overly fatigued. Some of the other big benefits. Okay, let me run through the rest of the zones.
Yes, let's go
through
through
this. And then I'll go back to zone 2 because there's a lot of exciting things that happen for us in zone 2. So zone 3 is usually 70 to 80% of your max heart rate. And this is where you might be in for half marathon pace. And you can still sustain this for a long time, but like I said, half marathon pace. So you want to get some time in this to practice, like maybe your tempo paces. But this is, now we're getting in to the higher zones.
Okay.
So zone 4, and you can still be conversational now. Maybe it gets a little bit harder to talk, right? So zone 4 is that 80 to 90%.
Okay.
Think of 5K, 10K pace.
So it's our speed runs, basically.
Yes, right. So And this is usually where your lactate threshold pace will sit.
Okay.
Okay. So again, about 20 to 60 minutes or so that you could sustain. I don't want to say comfortably, but you know, in this pace. So then we go to zone 5. Zone 5 is like sprinting.
Okay.
Right? So this is usually 90 to 100% of your max heart rate. We don't spend a lot of time here,
Okay.
but it's still important, like I said, to spend time in all your zones. So can I go back to zone 2 a little
Yeah.
bit?
So 5 zones. How do we define them? But go to zone 2.
Okay, but then we can talk about that after
Yeah.
that. So zone 2, this is where a lot of the magic happens, right? This is where we build our engine, right?
Okay.
So whenever we spend time in zone 2, we're increasing the number and size of the mitochondria in our cells, and they're like our energy powerhouse,
Yeah.
okay? We also build the density network of our capillaries. Capillaries, why are they important? They are the things that bring the oxygen to our muscles,
Okay.
right? So those are the 2 big things that happen in zone 2. And like I said, it's building that fitness space, building that engine.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So we should be aiming to run in zone 2.
yes. So really 80% slower than lactate threshold pace. You don't have to spend 80% in zone 2, but you can gather a lot of zone 2 time just by having a good policy as well. When you do your harder workouts, like speed work or tempo runs, you got to make sure that you have a solid warm up and a solid cool down.
Okay.
So not only does that help prepare you for those runs and to recover from those runs, but it also gets you more time at your zone 2 pace, right? So
Oh, I see. So you're combining
Yeah.
that. So if we go to track, let's say, and we work on our speed, we do warm up
Yeah.
and cool down in zone 2,
Right.
and then we go up to zone 4.
right.
So we shouldn't be training in zone 4 or zone 5 all the time.
No,
Okay.
that will likely, cause you to be overtrained or exhausted or potentially injured. That's another thing with zone 2. Zone 2 is our pace where we're a zone where we're less likely to injure ourselves, right? And so you can do a lot more of it. Yes, and a lot of it is good for you.
But it's so hard, I think, for us runners, because we so want to run fast and
Yes.
improve, right? And we're looking at the watch and thinking, oh my God, I go so slow. So
Right, but
then it's
not really
important to
about that.
understand.
Right, and so ultimately, while you're running, you don't have to be checking, are you in the right pace zone or is my heart rate in the right spot? Go by your perceived effort. If you're running by yourself, you maybe not have a conversation with yourself, but you go by that perceived effort. Do I feel good?
You should join me on my runs. It's all about self-talk.
There you go. Usually we don't need those mantras in zone 2 pace. That might be like during a marathon or something, but yeah, whatever works.
So
Yeah.
what is then healthy rested heart rate?
Okay, sure. So when we talk about healthy, I think about there's 3 different areas or 3 different ranges. You have
Okay.
what's considered normal, right? And this is across everybody, not people who are maybe runners or athletes. And then you have like what's kind of the healthy range, and then what's typical for an athlete.
Okay.
So normal, anywhere from 60 to 100 beats per minute, right? So, and just a quick comment about the resting heart rate. You really want to take this. And if you have wearables that are measuring your sleep, your resting heart rate would really be like while you're asleep, right?
Okay.
Or when if you don't have something to measure it, when you first wake up in the morning, something to time and then take it manually, right?
Yeah.
So back to normal, 60 to 100. If you have higher than that,
Okay.
then you might want to go just consult your doctor
Yeah.
and see if there's any concerns. Now, healthy would be more of that, like 50 to 70 beats per minute, right? These are usually people that don't have any strain on their heart. Athlete range would fall more 40, and it can get as low as like 40 to 55. So like,
Because you're in that zone, right?
yeah, I'm usually in the 40s. So one thing to note, if anyone ever goes, if you're an athlete and you fall in that range, if you ever need to go into surgery or go under general anesthesia, to make sure that you let them know, so they're not overly concerned. Like mine dropped down to 39 when I had my surgery last year, and so I prepped them before at least so they didn't freak out too much. But yeah, so it's good to track. You might notice certain things can affect temporarily your resting heart rate, like if you've had a couple of drinks or something like that, and then before bed. But resting heart rate itself, it's nice to watch your trends.
Okay.
Because if, say, for some reason you see a longer trend, not just like a single night where it's gone up higher, you could be overtraining, right? And so you need to, it's helpful just to keep an eye on like how some of those things can show up in like what you're tracking. To help give you clues or signals outside of just the fact that you just not you might feel that you're in that state of like overtraining.
Interesting.
When we're sick sometimes as well, our resting heart rate can go up.
Yeah. So you mentioned 5 zones.
Yep.
And then you also reference lactate threshold. Can you elaborate on that, or
Sure.
Does lactate threshold help you define those heart rate zones?
Yes. So when it comes to lactate threshold, it's a pretty simple definition, right? It's like the intensity level or the pace that we run at where our body can no longer flush the lactate through or remove it faster than it accumulates.
Okay.
So going back to this, like I mentioned before, lactate threshold is usually a pace that you can't spend that long of a time at. Maybe 30 to 60 minutes, depending on what your body is used to pushing through.
So if I run a marathon, let's say in
you should not
3
be running
hours, I can only aim for maybe the last 20 minutes in that lactate
if you want to try to push
pace.
it out at the end.
Okay.
Right? You definitely don't want to start at that pace. You'd be setting yourself up for
and then crawl.
Not a great experience. So that does help you at least. With that. So, and there's a couple of ways to determine what your pace is. So if you have the capability to go get it tested, like I say in a lab, it's just like a place where they have a treadmill and some computers. I highly recommend it.
How can you, because I know you had that test done. So can you walk us through?
Yeah, I've had it done a couple of times.
Okay.
And I think, especially if you're starting up a training season and you want to get a baseline for where you currently are at, and then maybe what your marathon or your race goal pace is.
Okay.
Maybe then how can I increase my lactate threshold, or essentially decrease the pace, right, at which it starts spiking. So the way the test is done, it's still, I check the price again. You can get it in Houston for about $150.
Okay.
It takes about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
And essentially you get on a treadmill, you start out easy, because you're always going to have some level of lactate in your blood. So when you start out easy, and about every 3 minutes, you pause real quick, put your feet to the side.
I'm going to turn here.
And then they'll prick your finger.
Okay.
And take a blood sample. And then plug it in to, the data, the computer.
Okay.
So what they look for, and so you increase the speed every 3 minutes, right? So what they look for is that spike.
Okay.
And it's very clear. So you keep going until that spike.
Okay.
Then they interpret the data to identify what your lactate threshold pace would be.
Okay.
And then from there, you can also get your heart rate zones. So that's one of the nice benefits of that test as well. If you don't know your heart rate zones, because going back to that, people think, oh, I'll go by the default that's in Garmin.
Yes.
Or I'll go by my max age, or 220 max minus my age. And it's not the correct way to do it. You really need to personalize your zones.
Okay.
Because everyone's gonna be a little different. Like mine actually runs higher than a lot of people. So it's
so what's your zone 2 pace? Where does it
honestly for me it's anything under 160.
Seriously? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But that's my perceived effort as well. It matches that. So like I said, but you can see my resting heart rate's still very low. So that's why I have to personalize my zones to me because everyone's a little different. So yeah, so that's one of the other benefits of the test. So, and once you know your lactate threshold pace, now you can gear your training around that pace, running just at it, running just below, running just above. And that's where you can really make an impact in your training based upon where you are at that point. And then you can go back, say, closer to the end of that training block, and then see what kind of impacts you've made to it if you want to get retested.
Appreciate it.
And so it's really helpful to help like define where you want your training paces to be. Now keep in mind, remember these are the zone 4, not all the time.
You're right.
But you can do different distances at different intervals on that. Or work on threshold training where maybe you're doing like 2-mile repeats or 1-mile repeat or for close to that pace, but you're still giving your body that chance to recover between to help flush that lactate through so you can go back out and do another interval, right?
So we can, or the question is, can we improve that lactate threshold?
Yes.
And if so, what do we need to do to improve it? Is it more running, more cardio, more strength, more what?
So they say
more sleep?
Yes, well sleep is always good for everybody.
Okay.
That's where our body essentially repairs itself from all the hard work you put it through that day. But if you're focusing on running, you really need to be doing this in the sport of running.
Okay.
Right? Like high intensity interval training can also help, but it's not directly, it doesn't directly translate to running as if you were doing running specific workouts. Yeah.
Okay, so lactate threshold will help us define the heart rate zones, and then we can.
But I also want to say there's a couple of other ways to get it without the test.
Okay, so what are those?
You can do some of the some of the GPS watches now will estimate it as well.
Okay.
So some of the higher tech Garmin Forerunners or other Garmin's, or I don't want to say like Coros doesn't either, I don't know, but you can Google, you know, and search
for the watch.
which ones provide that. But you can also do a field test, which usually takes about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Without giving any official instructions, you can go and look that up as well. But if you search like lactate threshold field test, but it's seeing, again, they want you to push yourself for that 30 minutes. Remember, that was kind of that target time range. And then but you have to have some data, right? So then you can look at what your data is after that run and then help estimate it itself. So,
interesting.
But it is really great. Like lab testing is obviously going to be the most accurate.
Okay. So then the other thing that you mentioned was VO2 Max. What is VO2 Max and why do we need to track it?
Sure. So VO2 Max is essentially, it's the maximal amount of oxygen that you can take in, like we're doing, breathing while we're running, and then transport it like through your blood to the muscles to then convert to energy.
Okay.
So we go back to that zone 2 magic, right?
Yes.
The mitochondria and the capillaries, like that all ties in to that VO2 max as well, which is why it's important to do that type of zone training, but then also do the type of training that will help work out your heart harder, right? So VO2 max, if you've already been running for a while, and you've been like pushing it, usually you hit like a stable, state of VO2 max.
Okay.
Some of it is, there's like 4 factors that affect it. There's age, gender, altitude, and your training.
Okay.
Age, as we get older, our VO2 max will naturally decrease.
Decline,
yeah. So usually they say after the age of 30, which I'm well past now, but up to 1 to 2% a year, which can be a lot. So we have to work hard to keep that stable, right? So gender-wise, males have naturally more muscle mass than women do. And they also have higher hemoglobin levels because of that, or volume of that. So naturally, and if you look at the charts or tables, you'll see that the men's ranges are a little bit higher.
Okay.
So altitude is just something to notice. Like for example, if you travel, those of us that live here at sea level, if you travel to somewhere of a higher altitude and you run outside and you normally keep up with your VO2 max, your Garmin might be like, your VO2 max just dropped like 3 points. Don't worry about it. It's just because of the altitude. You can't get as much oxygen at the higher altitudes, right?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what VO2 max is all about. So once you go back home, it'll return to normal, right? Now, if you stay in a higher altitude place for a long period of time, your body will start to make the adaptations.
And then when you're back to the sea level, you should be able to run faster?
If you spend a long enough time at altitude, if you're just going to Colorado for like
yeah, because everybody's like, oh, I'm in Colorado, I'm going to come back to Houston and
maybe a couple of months, but not a week. So,
Dang.
yeah. But it's good to know so that way you don't freak out like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like my VO2 max just dropped.
Yeah.
And then of course training, that's how we can impact by making sure we hit those higher zones, right? So it doesn't just help your lactate threshold, it also helps either sustain, like maintain what you have for your VO2 max or to help improve it, especially if you're a newer runner, right?
Okay.
But you can't, but that's why I say, if you've been running for a while and you're kind of at a sustained fitness level, lactate threshold is usually the way to go if you want to look at your numbers and then pushing from that point. And it's very easy to measure it through the test.
Yeah. The VO2 max, I know watches track it.
Yes.
But then you can also get a test done, right?
You can, and I have gotten it done like twice before.
Okay.
But I'd rather take the finger pricks
Really?
off of, I get a little claustrophobic with the mask.
Well,
some people don't mind.
Can you explain how is the test being done?
So the way the test is conducted is kind of similar to a lactate threshold test, except instead of getting your fingers pricked to get the blood samples, you have to wear a mask.
Okay.
That's measuring your,
breathing.
your breathing. So some people, like I said, they might not mind that, and some people they might have an issue with. But if you are already a runner, or even if you're still a beginner as well, I would still honestly recommend the lactate threshold test over the VO2 max if you're looking for specific guidance on like that training block, right? Or how to do it, because you can get your zone paces as well from a VO2 max test. But I felt like having gotten both done, for me the lactate threshold was more accurate on the paces.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're all gonna get. I got my VO2 max done.
Yeah. How was your experience?
I felt like I could go faster, but the treadmill had a limit, so I don't know. But then I was comparing with Apple Watch, and I don't think Apple Watch is, as advanced in running as, let's say, Garmin, and it was relatively close. Yeah.
They say usually that at worst, like the newer watches are within like plus or minus 10%. So I found when I got my VO2 max tested, and then later got, a Garmin that told me they were close.
Yeah.
So now really, I just try to keep it as maintained as I can. I look at it, but I don't focus on it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll try the lactate threshold test.
But there's a lot of benefits to having a higher VO2 max or pushing for it, for sure.
Yeah, so I know VO2 max just for regular people is associated with their cardiovascular health, right? And I think there is even some evidence that the higher your VO2 max, the better chances of you living longer.
Yes, and this is true. Pending, of course, you can escape some things like cancer,
Yes, of course.
Not really related as directly to VO2 max. A book that I highly recommend reading or listening to is Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, Attia. And he talks about VO2 max being important for longevity, essentially saying that as we get older, it's good to be moving, but you need to do more than just move.
I'm gonna go.
You need to occasionally get your heart rate up into those VO2 max zones to really reap the best benefit. So like leisurely walking is better than nothing, but whatever method of movement that you can do to elevate your heart rate is important to do. So it obviously reduces your risks of like cardiovascular diseases, but it also benefits any type of mortality causes. And so it's and then there's also other great long-term benefits from having that heart health is like increased memory function, right? Like with your hippocampus and just in general. So if you're already moving, you're doing awesome things for your health. Exercise, even though we might think it's a no-brainer, is the most important thing we can do for ourselves as we get older.
Yeah.
To, again, like the book talks about health span versus lifespan, to increase that health span. And there's a quote that I found that I really liked, not in this book, but it's like, we don't stop exercising because we get old. We get old because we stop exercising.
Oh, I heard that and I so agree.
I know. So like that to me is, again, it's not rocket science, but it's so important, right? Yeah.
Well, and I think with this sedentary lifestyle that we are all living right now, and it's almost like with COVID and us working from home, there is an epidemic of people being too sedentary. Here. We need to add some movement, and just like you said, whether it's buying a walking pad under your desk, or walking, or having a podcast on the run. Hey, why not?
Multitasking here.
Yes, exactly. Well, just to close the loop on VO2 Max, I believe there are also some things that can impact it, like stress and lack of sleep. Could you, alcohol? I mean, shall we have a drink before the race?
That depends on what your body is used to. Everyone needs to do that what personally best fits for them.
Okay.
So I don't want to say, you know, like everything is off limits. I've had, you know, a glass of wine the night before, maybe not a goal race, right? I talked about that marathon de Medoc in France.
Yes.
I had a few glasses the night before and about a glass and a half during the marathon, but that you're supposed to do it that way.
Hey, I had margarita before the 10K and it was my PR.
Yeah, so, but I mean, again, it depends on how your body handles it and processes it, and that will be different, personalized to everyone. So, but just like I mentioned before, understand that alcohol can influence any of your numbers. It usually reduces the quality of your sleep, impacts your heart rate variability, you know, resting heart rate, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But again, I still partake occasionally, so it's something that people need to personalize for themselves.
Yeah. You mentioned heart rate variability. Can you can you explain what is it? Why do we need to track it or know it?
So heart rate variability isn't one of those like must follows, but it's another little clue to how you're training or how your body's recovering, how your training's going, but it's that slight change in your heart rate beat to beat.
Okay.
So when it comes to heart rate variability, you want a higher number.
Okay.
So like I'm kind of a little of an oddball and I wear 2 trackers.
Well, you love science.
Yes. So on my Fitbit Inspire, it gives me my direct heart rate variability number, and then Garmin factors it in to the body battery. But some Garmins might also have the direct number. But it essentially is like how your body responds to all the stressors in life. So if you have a higher number, that usually means your recovery is better.
Okay.
Like I said, alcohol can affect. I notice if I have like 2 drinks, say, my heart rate variability that night can sometimes be a little bit lower.
Okay.
But again, it's one of those things that you can track, but it shouldn't have a huge impact. But like stress will affect it. You could be dehydrated. That could also affect it. You could be overly tired, not getting enough sleep. So it's not only alcohol is the culprit, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can. So it's just nice to keep an eye on it, because going back to that, it's about watching your trends.
Yeah.
Like going back to that resting heart rate. Maybe if you're off trend for like a week, right? Not just one night, that there might be something you might need to ease back on your training a little bit, or make sure you focus a little more on getting good sleep kind of thing.
Do you track your sleep?
Yes.
What do you use?
Both.
Both. So you sleep with all these devices?
Yes, I do.
Oh my gosh.
No, but I mean, I just track my sleep to make sure that I look at my sleep scores, but ultimately it's like, how well have you rested? What I like about Garmin is I do like the body battery feature.
Okay.
So like when you're sleeping, you are literally recharging, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll show you how well you recharge overnight, which ties into the stress levels of your body, which ties into your heart rate variability while you're sleeping,
Oh my gosh.
right? So again, don't obsess over all the numbers, but it's helpful and more on trends
Okay.
than just like these one-offs,
Yeah.
right?
That's interesting.
So much data we have.
Well-
I would say at our fingertips or at our wrists.
No wonder you're an engineer, you know. You gotta have that math brain.
Yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned at the beginning, when we started, you said cadence.
Yes.
So can you explain what a
Sure.
cadence is?
Sure. So, very simply put, it's the number of steps per minute that we take when we run. So, cadence is something some people just naturally, you know, the way our bodies are constructed, the way that our form naturally is, most people will fall within a normal cadence range.
Okay.
So sometimes they say that sweet spot is around 180. I looked this up. It came from the 1984 Olympics. A guy named Jack Daniels, not associated with like the whiskey that I know, but I think he observed some of the elite runners and determined what kind of that average cadence range was. Now, the key is if you're like below 160,
Okay.
then you might want to look at what you can do to increase it. Because the higher the cadence number, that means, or if you say the lower the cadence number, the more contact time we have with the ground.
Okay.
And you might notice when you're running more slowly, like you have a little more bounce in your step. So all of that means that you have an increased risk of injuries. Right? So also if you have a lower cadence, you might be overstriding. That means you're like reaching with your toes. That will also put more stress where you don't need it. Ultimately, your foot should be falling right under your body when you run. And this is why drills like A skips, B skips, things like that help get kind of your legs, your lower body prepared for that motion are good before we do like harder workouts especially. So you can try to retrain. Sometimes you can find music that has a certain beat per minute and help retrain. But it's always positive to try to get it. Any way that we can reduce our risk of injury is always a positive thing. And you'll notice too, obviously when you run faster, that your cadence will increase slightly, but not by much.
Okay.
Maybe like 3 to 5%.
Okay.
So you might see in your data, but if you're doing like intervals, a little hop up when you're going faster,
Okay.
and then hop back down. So that's naturally, when we run faster, we have to tighten up our running economy.
True.
So our form usually improves and everything, and that's why we had that slight
Increase in
impact
cadence.
to our cadence, yeah.
Interesting. So essentially, we can improve cadence, and we should
Yes.
be striving if we want to get a little bit advanced.
Yes, but like I said, it's normal. Probably anything,
Yeah.
165 and higher is pretty normal and fine. It's when you get in that lower range that you might need to take a look at seeing what you can do to boost it.
And
a little
mostly
bit.
to prevent injury.
Yes, yes,
At the end of the day, we want to finish strong. And
exactly.
yeah. Okay. That's quite interesting. So we touch upon several things, right? Heart rate zones, training in zones, cadence, HRV,
Yes. A lot of
VO2
stuff.
Max, lactate threshold. If you were to summarize for our runners, what should they be possibly tracking?
So it all depends on what your current goals are, of course. I would say all of the above can be helpful to track trends. And if you're trying to look at an improvement, right? So if you're working hard on your training block and you know your lactate threshold pace, also lots of times as we get fitter, we build that engine and then we grow the engine and strength, right? More horsepower, if you will.
Okay, yes.
Then you should see improvements like maybe, I don't want to say it's necessary, but like in your resting heart rate, in your heart rate variability, in your sleep scores, right?
Yes.
So all this kind of ties together, but it also depends on what your goals are, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
always.
It helps just to have numbers to gauge off of. It's a piece of the puzzle.
Well, and they say if you're not tracking, you don't know the progress.
Right.
So if you want to see progress in something, it's good to track, whether it's
Right.
your speed, heart rate, variability, or cadence.
But ultimately, you also have to listen to your body. If your body is giving you that feedback that you can't hit those last couple intervals in a workout, or that you're not getting enough sleep, then you need to take a little bit of a step back. Say, maybe I need some rest. Maybe I need to cut out speed work this week, right? And let my body kind of recover from all the hard work I've been putting it through.
Yeah.
So perceived effort and ultimately listening to your body is still, first and foremost, the best way, you know.
Yes. Sometimes we forget to
you don't want
listen
to
to
be
our
just about
bodies.
the numbers, right?
Yes.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that was very interesting. I'm curious. We hear a lot about runner's high.
Yeah, it is not just a running group in Houston as well, right?
Yes, exactly. So, some sort of state that I sure hit many times.
Yeah.
So, can you elaborate on what's runner's high? What do we feel and why do we feel it?
So this I actually did a little bit of research on, because I'm all about doing research and finding information on things. So, first of all, if you are a runner and you never experience this runner's high, it's okay. Like, sometimes it only affects certain people, but ultimately it's that feeling of endorphins, right? So you might think if it's like a slight euphoria, maybe it's not while we're running, maybe it is, maybe it's after we run, right? So one of the things that endorphins do help is, like, when you're recovering, they can help you deal with maybe a little bit of, hopefully not too much pain, you know, from recovering. But when I looked into this, what I found more interesting is about a term called endocannabinoids.
Okay, wow.
Which is something that is actually more, it's like scientifically proven, because it's something our body naturally produces. So it's a biochemical substance that is similar, like in effects of cannabis, you know, that we produce naturally. And we
are not promoting drugs here.
No, we're promoting running.
Right.
Running to produce this. No. So that essentially on this, that was the definition of it. So So these endocannabinoids, you usually don't get them highly produced in, like, the easy paces. And usually in the really fast paces, you're just wearing your body out a lot more, right?
Yeah.
So what I've read, the sweet spots usually around your zone 3.
Okay.
Right? So maybe hopefully when you're done running a marathon or half marathon, you get that high after you finish. Hopefully you're also super proud of yourself as well. But that this can help short term, like reduce anxiety levels and with a sense of calmness. So that's essentially what they say are the short term effects. And also, evidently we produce up to 3 times as more of these, we're going uphill now, in the morning. So if you're a morning runner, like I am, and I think you are as well, then you can actually reap some more benefits of this.
Wow.
So, but that's just short-term effects. I mean, ultimately running, like we mentioned on VO2 Max, but like running has a lot of
but we all wanna, very often you finish the run while you were up super early.
Right.
But you finish so energetic and positive and ready to start the day.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why many of us even start the run, to get that feeling afterwards.
And also helps with that mental, like, focus and everything as well. One other reason I like to do first thing in the day is nothing can disrupt, like, get in the way at that point, right?
Yes.
Like, you plan it, you get it done, whether it's work or family or whatever, weather, you know, that you've got it knocked out.
Well, that brings me to another segment of your life outside of running, right? Because you're an engineer, you have a full-time job, you have 2 beautiful girls that I'm sure are inspired by you. Have they picked up running?
So one of my daughters does do track.
Okay.
And I think I could beat her maybe 800 meters or longer.
Okay.
She would toast me in like a 100 or 200 or 400, I think.
That's a motivation.
She's 13 and 7th grade. And I did not come into running until later in life. I was 28 when I did my first marathon.
Okay.
And So I love that she is into it now. Genetic-wise, her father does not do long distance, my husband Joe, but he was always a sprinter.
Oh.
So I'm hoping maybe she's got kind of a good mix of both. But yeah, so it's always great to see your kid get involved in the things that you love.
Absolutely.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah, makes you very proud. What does running mean to you?
Running for me was finding a sport that is a multi-purpose sport, right?
Okay.
It helps tremendously with your fitness and your health. But then also, I played sports some when I was younger, but nothing, I was very competitive with or a superstar at. Like choir was more my thing. But coming into running and then finding it to be a sport that I can challenge myself at and be successful at. When I go back to that 28-year-old self, when I did my first Houston, I would have never imagined that now at 45, like what all I've accomplished.
Yes.
Finishing a 100-miler as well,
Right.
So it's about pushing our bodies safely to see what we can accomplish, and not everybody has to have, extreme goals, but just again, for me, it's part of my balance and my self-care as well. And I've made so many amazing friends, including yourself, throughout all of this process of training. So I'm so glad I took that leap back, oh gosh, almost 17 years ago, to really start on this journey. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know you inspire so many people by being a coach and giving back to the community and educating amateur runners so they can reach their potential. What's next for you? What's your next running goal or goals?
I want to do all the 7 continents eventually.
Okay.
I'm running Sydney, which is that 7th marathon major, because I finished with Tokyo in 2023, the original 6.
Okay.
I'm running Sydney in August.
How did it feel when they added the 7th? Were you happy that there is something else to work
It's another
towards?
continent.
Okay.
Another continent to get done. So, and then I'm also going to do I'm going to do 100K in December.
Wow.
Brazos-Ben.
You can do that. Okay.
And then Houston again, and we'll just see. So I went from also doing like 1 race per year to now I might do up to like 4 or so. But also, and I've been super excited to help other people, improve their times. So that's also part of what I like next. What can I do to also like help and coach? And so I don't know. It's kind of like,
how many Houston marathons do you want to run?
I'm going to keep running until my body makes me drop to halves. I've got 16 down so far. And so I want to streak as long as I possibly can. And
are they giving extra medals for 20, 30?
No, but you get a free legacy shirt after every 5 years, after 10 years. And once you hit legacy after 10 years, you get access to the really nice flush toilets inside the GMG. So
that is important for a runner.
No, I love it. Houston's such a great race. And I will always be back for it. I always sign up the day of the race the year before. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to run with you, to learn so much about running.
Thank you for asking me to be here.
I think now we will have to make an appointment to get our test done. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Melody.
Bye, everyone.
What a run! Hope you finish strong and inspired. If you like this episode, hit that subscribe button. Until the next run.